Good morning, everybody. It is 8:26 a.m. Welcome to my channel. My voice is hoarse. I guess yesterday, because my daughter had her first travel soccer game, and I guess I screamed my head off. So that's why you're hearing this voice like this. What a market! What a market we have! Wow. Now, what's interesting is Trump was postponing strikes, but then I just saw someone from Iran saying there is no talks happening with the U.S. at all. So who knows what's the truth, right? But bottom line, our markets did just jump up a ton. Crude on the initial news was down to $85 a barrel. The VIX was over the 30s. Now it's at 25. It went down to like under 23 earlier. So this is going to be a very interesting Monday, which I think it could be very confusing price action. For sure. For sure. There's going to be confusing price action today. Right? This week, let's see here. This week, I'm trying to see here what we have. Is there anything that's crazy? Not really. Kind of data light this week. There's some things, but nothing major. In March, seasonally, is the highest volume traded of each year, which is probably coming to be true again. Okay, so this is just insane, this market. Insane. Alright, let's get into it. Welcome to my channel. My name is Steven Gonzalez. I use market profile and find profile to find structure in the markets along with supply and demand, gamma exposure levels, the most traded price of the year, the month, the week, and the previous day. That's how I come up with game plans. Now, once the market opens, I use my market internals, anchor VWAPs, a little ICT thrown in there. Sorry, I'm just getting distracted by some time in sales. So, just crazy. Just this market's crazy. Anyway, so little ICT thrown in there. Okay. Now, hopefully, you join me every day. Subscribe, set that alert, give you the market story, the market news, technical analysis, and I give you the long and short trade scenarios in the Nasdaq and the ES futures later on in the stream. All right. Now, if you want more in-depth coverage, you're gonna join my Discord. That's Confluence Trading. Go to my YouTube homepage. Click on the link. What are you waiting for? Let me be your indicator. All right, man. This voice is whew. So we're gapping up right now, slightly in the ES. You're kind of at Friday's highs in the Nasdaq. All right. So let's get right into the futures watch list here. Russell's leading the pack, up 2.67. The Dow is up 1.79. Nasdaq's up 1.64. ES up 1.62. Bitcoin's up 0.25. 30-year bonds are being bought, but it's only slightly. 10-year yield is down slightly, down 0.11. Dollar's down 0.17. Ethereum down 0.38. Silver was down a lot more. Gold was down a lot more earlier. Silver's down 2%. Gold's down 4%. VIX is down 4.82. We're at 25. Crude was at 99, went all the way down to 85. Now it's at 91.48, down 6.87%. All right, Mag 7 Plus. Nvidia up over 2%. All right, GE up 1.84. Broadcom up 1.85. JP Morgan up 1.55. Okay, Meta's up 1.31. Amazon up 1.24. Okay, there is no laggard, is Netflix. Okay, but it's still up. Top sectors: Home Depot up 2.24. Goldman Sachs up 2.21. Visa up 1.55. Caterpillar up 1.54. Qualcomm up 1.42. Walmart up 1.24. Uber up 1.14. United Healthcare is up a percent. GEV Vernova is up a percent. Now, the laggards is still the mining was down a lot more. It's only down 0.61. Chevron down 0.88, and Exxon's the laggard down 1.36. Moving on to sectors. Basic materials is your leader. Well, semis now up 2.0. That's moving around on me. So basic materials and semis up. Financials up 1.72. Technology up 1.63. Everything's up except energy, which has usually been the opposite. Right? All right, let's get over to the economic calendar. So, today, Chicago Fed at 8:30. That already happened. Nothing really else that crazy. Let's go to a one star just to see. Nope, nothing crazy. All right, so we're gonna move on to Trump's schedule today. A lot of TBDs. Let's see, 8 a.m. President participates in the executive time. 1 p.m. President participates in the Memphis Safe Task Force Roundtable. Okay, at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm sure he's going to talk throughout the day. Okay, let's go to the juice here. So, up at the top here, you can see. Sorry, I never went to that schedule. There's the schedule, just Chicago Fed today. Trump, like I said, to be determined. Let's go to the juice here. I don't see anything today in the juice, really. Okay. Now, Fed Goolsby is speaking right now, it looks like. But up top here, what I wanted to show you guys is Trump on Iran. U.S. and Iran have had over the last 2 days very good and productive conversations regarding complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East. Right? It says down here, this is where the market ripped. Trump postponed strikes against Iran's power plants. Okay. Then at 7:47, Iran's, it says FARS, whatever that means, news agency, citing source, there are no direct communication with the U.S. nor through intermediaries. So who knows who's telling the truth here? Okay, I don't know. So I think that's why there's a pretty decent wick in the price action. That's kind of crazy. If I mean, I wouldn't put it past Trump maybe to make that up possibly. I don't know, right? You don't know who's telling the truth really at the time. Okay. Let's get into some other news here. Let's go to see if there's something here. Just want to see if anybody actually talks about that. Let's see. I'm just trying to see. Oh, here we go. According to the Wall Street Journal, Iran's Fars news agency reported there are no direct or indirect communications. What I just talked about with the U.S. Fars added that Trump has backed down on targeting Iranian power plants following Iranian threats to retaliate with strikes on similar sites in West Asia. It says media reports have said that the two sides have had only sparse and indirect communications since the war began. Keep in mind that even in fighting ended now, the economic fallout from the last several weeks will be substantial, but at least now there is a line slight toward resolution, the vital knowledge analyst said. So, this is not over, okay? It's just not. Alright, let's see if there's any other newsworthy other than that, which it probably is not. It says OpenAI sweetens private equity pitch amid enterprise turf war with Anthropic. Musk says SpaceX and Tesla to build advanced chip factories in Austin. Pentagon to adopt Palantir AI as core U.S. military system. Passenger jet collides with fire truck in New York's LaGuardia. Wow. So some of this was put out after that news from Trump. So we're gonna move on. Okay. Now, Friday was very interesting. Okay. Let's just get right into internals. And this was very odd today. Okay. So now this market pushed down and was hanging at the previous day's lows. You can see the consolidation for a while. Okay. Meanwhile, the internals were not very um, strong. They weren't super weak. However, I talked about this on Friday. I said technology has had money flows. Okay. Has had money flows. And I said every day technology was being bought. And I said you need to see technology be weak in order for this market to fall. So on Friday, tech was the laggard. Okay, that was very important. I've been talking about that. Now, even though it was, right, it was still, we're moving sideways because a lot of the rest of the market was not that weak. Look at financials, right? However, a lot of these readings were weak, and I was like, all right, we're in a downtrend. So I shorted right in here, right when we were testing the previous day's lows, and I was able to get like a 1.5R. And then there was some news that came out right here that I just scaled out of my position on that move down, right? And I said this is just ranging. It should it's OPEX, it's quad witching. We could just pin here, and then it fell apart. Okay, so like I said, I called out we needed tech to be weak in order to fall. That's what happened. Okay, now moving on to daily charts. All right, moving on. Let's get into these daily charts. And there's big levels to talk about here. Okay, so right off the bat, this morning we were really pushing lower. Okay, but then that news came, and what we did is we broke the 652 650s. Now we're above them, obviously, but this was a I was like very cautious here at that when we hit that support on Friday. Now that week to date anchor view, I'm sorry, the 2025 anchor view up is at 631, lines up with a 634 support. That's where I thought, okay, this market can go towards. Now who knows with this news? Okay. Now the important part is we're still below the 200-day moving average right now. We're at 657.57. We're right here. Okay, we're right around there. Okay, we're still underneath the 200-day moving average. So that's really what you have to look at. Last week's lows, the previous week's lows, not last week's lows, is around 661. Okay, and there's some levels we're going to get into the ES as well. But like I said, this market, this market has, with this news, has made this market even going to be harder today. Okay, it was even going to be harder. So let's get into the futures. Okay, so here's futures, right? You have a bullish engulfing candle now in a full session. Okay, you swept these two highs. You were all the way up to here now, 67.50s. You came into this daily supply zone, found rejection. Maybe because of that, the Iran is saying they're not even talking to us. Okay, so this becomes very difficult market now, right? Now, this is not a continuous contract. I'm going to show you in Ninja the correct levels that we're going to focus on, okay? Now, let's go to the Qs. Okay, let's go to the Qs. So the Qs, we have broken the, we already broke the 200-day moving average. Okay, now the other level you want to pay attention to here is 560, 562. That was really the support I was going to say to be watching. Okay, because there's a swing low here at 580. That 580 was the support I was looking at on Friday. That held into the close. Okay, obviously this morning we were down lower. So I was like, wow, we could move all the way down to 562, 560s. But now with this news, it's a little different, right? Where are we now, right? 591.95. So now we're back inside the previous week's range, which is crazy. If you get back into this balance, that could be very bullish. Okay. It's the markets now are pushing up again. So who knows what's going to happen, okay? Back under a 25 VIX. Now let's look at the futures. Okay, so futures, you can see here, you hit the 90 MA daily. Now the NASDAQ actually is relatively weaker compared to the range on Friday. Okay, so that's last week's lows. We took them out. We're backside last week in the futures. You can see it here. Okay, now let's check the breadth, right? These are the percentage of stocks where we closed. Now remember I talked about this is getting very, very oversold. We're at historical. Let's look at this here. We got down to only about 19% of stocks in the S&P 500 are above their 50-day moving average. That is a frothy level. Okay, you generally just don't stay down there. Okay, and all you needed was some positivity to bring the markets back up. Okay, that's why I said when we were in here, I was like, well, remember the software was falling when we were in here. So the overall market got weak. All right, so that's the breadth. We're going to move on. We're going to talk about now the hourly charts. Okay. Okay, these are the hourly charts. I mean, it was pretty nuts. I was charting out here, and then all of a sudden I saw this peak, and I was like, that's pretty strong buying. And then you just saw this rip, and I was like, what the heck is going on? And then I saw the news, right? So we were all the way down here in this major demand zone, and we found buyers, and then we got the news, right? So if you see what we did, we consolidated here, and now you took back all of this range. Guess where we are though? Inside, back inside this range. Okay, so that's how the market's going to move. Always going to find itself back into its consolidation. Okay, you can see just how big this daily candle and the 4 hour are pretty much identical. All right. Now, like I said, we went all the way up to here, almost up to 67.60, about, or 67.55 was the most traded price of the rolling week. Almost went there, and now we have a wick. Okay, so you know, let's put a little volume profile on this. Okay, let's just see from this drop where volume is holding right now. Okay, so it looks like it's 66.38 is the highest volume from this drop. Okay, 66.38. So you want to just be very mindful of that level. Okay, 66.38 in the ES is the most traded price from the recent drop. Okay, so most likely when I chart today, the most traded price of the week will probably push lower. All right, so it's always good to have that type of visual. All right, so I think today, because we just took care of this structure as well, we might just do this. Bounce between 6,700, 6,620. Because I'm telling you right now, this market just made a huge move, right? Now comes back into consolidation because nobody really knows what's going on, okay? And it's not going to be easy. All right, let's move on to the NASDAQ. It's not going to be much different, okay? And right off the bat, let's get that level, right? You want to get the most traded price since the drop, right? So let's do it since the drop. That level, 24490. 24490. That's the most traded price since the drop. And see, notice, so I want to be notice where the markets are going to tend to live in this area here. Okay. So we're back inside value area of this drop. So this is not going to be the easiest area. Okay. All right. So same thing. We hit this high volume node, the high volume composite node from the past around 239, and this demand was holding the market, and then the news came out. Here's our consolidation. Okay, I think that's the trading range for today, unless noted otherwise. Okay, that's really how it's what I'm looking at right now. I think this is going to be very indecisive today. I like that the VIX is at least under 25, so it won't be too nuts because our markets were over 30 VIX. Now, if we opened up with a 30 something VIX, yeah, that definitely is going to be very wild. All right, I still think we'll have good volatility, but it's Monday, and like I said, we just had a crazy move. Okay, it's kind of it's nuts, to be honest with you. Okay, now let's move on. Let's move on to the market profile, volume profile, and we'll get you out of here. So here's the market profile, volume profile. Alright, so I'm going to break out this. Okay. So on a day like today, what you want to mark off, okay, we are gapping up. So gap fill, unbelievably, is 66.43. So you mark that off. Okay. Then next you want to mark off the overnight 50% retracement, 66.15. This happens to live inside single prints. You can see the emotional buying and the thin volume here. Okay. So you can see of this crazy profile, we're holding price above here. Okay. So remember I talked about the most traded price, the 66.40s, right? Most likely that's going to move the most traded price here. You need to hold the 66.40s, which happens to be gap fill. Right? So, what would I be looking for today? Let's get in to the long and short trade scenarios in the ES futures. Okay? So as I'm looking at this ES, I am going to go and say any retracement back into 66.40s, which is the most traded price of the rolling week, and it's gap fill, which is Friday's highs. Pull back into here, and any hold with a higher low to me is a long, targeting overnight highs and the 67.55, the most traded price of the rolling week previously. Now, alternative long, you do have single prints in the overnight futures. Okay, this very thin volume. How are we gonna handle that, right? Well, this is a void, right? Now, if we drop back into these single prints, right, happens to be also the 50% retracement of the overnight. Any support in this area, okay, and a higher low is a buy. Okay, so around the 66.15 area, any pullback there with a higher low back into the 66.40s is a long, targeting overnight highs and 67.55s. Okay, honestly, that's all I'm interested in is for a long. Now the shorts. Okay, what I'll say is this is not easy for shorts. It really is not. All right. Now, so that's the first thing I'm going to say. I'm probably not, it's going to be hard to short unless something really sets up. So the first thing that I would say is I'm not going to go for anything inside this range here. I need to see the market rip up to the overnight highs, 67.55s. If the 67.55s get resistance, okay, if they get resistance and you get that lower high, you could try to short down to the gap fill 66.40s. Okay, now if you take some off and want to hold a runner, this is where you get into the single prints of the sugar rush from Trump postponing strikes. Now, this is two ways. If the market is very weak, this does not stand a chance. Okay, this is going to get cleaned out like a hot knife through butter and get ready to go down to the overnight lows, the 64.83s. That could definitely happen. Okay, I don't, again, nobody knows. Okay, it just gets very tricky. Okay, because if we come down and fill that gap, right, I just think buyers are going to be hanging out here. So what you need to do is if we come down and we start to find acceptance inside this area, okay, most traded price on Friday about that, which is which level 66 hundreds. You need to see how the internals are and what's driving the market. Okay, then if you're conservative, try a short. But like I said, I'm not a fan of this, but that's conservative. Okay, I think the short play is a harder play today, and I think just in general the market's going to be hard to read today. So that's the ES. All right, let's move on to the Nasdaq. Okay, Nasdaq is also gapping up, just not as high. Okay, let's break out these this session. Okay, so just now let's get into those. Nasdaq short and long trade scenarios right now. Okay, and the first things I want to do when you're gapping up is mark out your gap fill, which is Friday's highs. That's your 24491s. That happens to line up just like the ES with the most traded price of the rolling week in a 24-hour chart, the 245s. That is a very key level. Okay. Next thing is 50% retracement of the overnights, which is 24268s, lines up beautifully with Friday's most traded price. Okay, now we do have single prints, which signifies emotional buying from the overnight, from the Trump news. Okay, now let's get right into scenarios for the NASDAQ futures. So, very easy to plan out here. As long as the NASDAQ can hold gap fill in 245, most traded price of the rolling week, that with a higher low is a long. You target overnight highs, 24763s. Now, if you pull back and hold, you can get back up to the 24, let's call it 249s, the most traded price of the RT8 session of the week. That happens to be also the most month to date anchored VWAP. Okay, the month to date anchored VWAP. Right? Now, that is not probably going to be easy today, but that's probably your best bet. Now, if the market does pull back and it hits the middle of these single prints and it holds those 243s and you get a higher low, remember, any support in single prints is bullish. You're going to target those overnight highs. All right, the 24763s. To me, that is what you need to look for. Okay. Now, I'm going to get into the shorts, which I don't think are going to be the easiest trade today. Okay. Let's get into the shorts. Now, what we have here is a bearish for value gap that did not get mitigated up here. You got some resistance around the 24725s. Okay. So, one thing you could wait for is for this sweep of the overnight highs 24763s to happen. You come back inside the overnight range, get a lower high. There's your you short to target the 245s. That's the gap fill and the most traded price of the 24-hour chart. Okay? Then you can target 243. If the market starts getting weak, these single prints will not provide support, and you should roll all the way down to at least 2390's last week's lows and then try to attack the overnight lows. Like I said, this is not the easiest trade to do. Okay? It is not. You're better off getting up top of the range here to get a premium to short. Okay? So that's the scenarios I have for the NASDAQ and the ES. Now, I promised you guys some long-term levels. Okay? So if we look at a long-term chart here, and I'm going to bring it down for you guys. Okay, this is a 4-hour chart. These were levels I'm really going to concentrate on. I don't think they're going to come into play much today. Okay, so there's a long-term support, a pivot level in the futures is at 64.80s. Okay, 64.80s. Okay, and there was a key support well at 65.28s. The market was playing with these levels earlier. And then I was going to bring up the 6400s. 6400 in the ES is the last line of defense before there's very poor structure. And you can see it in the volume here. It just drops off. However, we are back up here. Okay, we are back up here. There is a little bit of a pivot level here at 67.29s. But I just want to show you this right here. See this high volume node here at 66.34s, right there. In the past, that's a high volume node. So mark that off as well. You want to stay above that. Okay. The Nasdaq also had a big support level at the 23747. We almost came down there. But now look, we're all the way back up here. Okay. So nuts market, nuts. Okay. To see it a little easier in the ES, here's that last level of the 6400s. You can see the pocket of volume follows. If you look to the left, right there, look at that support. Okay, but now look at this candle today. So that's going to be it for me today, folks. Apologize for my voice. Smash the like button if you did enjoy that analysis. Okay. Now, hopefully, you join me every morning. I give you the market story, the economic calendar, the market news, technical analysis, and I just gave you the long and short trade scenarios of the Nasdaq ES futures. Okay. Now, if you want more in-depth coverage, you're going to join my Discord, Confluence Trading. Go to my YouTube homepage, click on the link, and sign up. What are you waiting for? Let me be your indicator. Okay. Today will be very, very hard, I believe, to trade. I might not take a trade, but if I see something that's a low-hanging fruit and that's worth to put risk on, I will do so. Remember, we should have whippy movement today. All right, we're past caught witching, so we don't have to worry about rollover or any of that. Okay, so just stay cautious. All right, stay cautious. Now, remember today, no trade's a trade. Hope everybody has a good day. And if I don't see you on Discord, I will see you here tomorrow morning, hopefully with a better voice. All right.